This is a service to
Strayatrains.
stopping all stations direct to
Strayatrains. Welcome back to Strayatrains and to the second episode of the Ins and Outs series. In this installment, we're going to take a look at the Glen Waverley Line. So let's take a look at a quick overview of the line. It is served by Metro's Extrapolis fleet, and on a rare chance of comment, but pretty much just the Extrapolis trains. The line is a total of 20 stations long, with just 12 of them being on the Glen Waverley Line only. It serves in Melbourne's eastern suburbs as part of the Burnley Group, giving it the dark blue colour on our railway map. The line code is GWI, of course that is the code for Glen Waverley Station, and the down service terminations are Burnley, Darling, Sindal and Glen Waverley. So let's take a look at the important features of the Glen Waverley service. First off, the loop direction. In the weekday mornings, Glen Waverley trains do not use the city loop. They run direct to Flinders Street and then back direct to Glen Waverley. However, once the Belgrave and Lilydale trains switch, meaning they run direct to the suburban destination via the city loop from Flinders Street, Glen Waverley trains only then start to use the city loop, which is quite interesting. And if that isn't interesting enough, on the weekends, all Glen Waverley services run direct to Flinders Street, but back to Glen Waverley go via the city loop. So I think maybe the Glen Waverley line has at least, if not the most, one of the most interesting loop patterns across all the lines on our network. In terms of the city platforms, Glen Waverley services depart Flinders Street platforms 2, 3 and sometimes 4. Then head to Southern Cross platform 10 before using platform 4 in the city loop, of course being the Burnley Loop platforms. Another interesting point about Glen Waverley services is at the end of morning peak, some of the trains, instead of heading empty cars back to Burnley sidings, actually run stops all services to Burnley Station, meaning they depart Flinders Street, stop at Richmond, East Richmond and then Burnley Station, which is, I guess, good use as they're going past those stations anyway. In terms of stopping patterns, throughout the day off-peak and on weekends, all services are stops all. However, during peak, there is some stops all services, others are stops all except East Richmond. However, the limited express routes are slightly different. In the mornings, the typical limited express route stops all to Richmond, runs express from Richmond to Kooyong, Kooyong to Gardiner, Gardiner to Holmes Glen, then Holmes Glen to Glen Waverley. However, in the peak PM, the only limited express service that is not a stops all except East Richmond is actually the 5:23 PM limited express that stops all to Richmond, runs express from Richmond to Darling, then stops all to Glen Waverley via the city loop. And if you thought that wasn't an odd enough service, in the peak AM there is actually a Sindal service that terminates at Sindal Station, which is the station before Glen Waverley. And finally, in terms of service frequency, on weekdays we look at an off-peak frequency of every 15 minutes. During peak, roughly every 12 minutes, but that does vary because of express services. And on the weekends, we're looking at a 20-minute frequency. Now time for some travelling tips. If you've just missed a Glen Waverley service at Flinders Street, or probably Southern Cross as well, though do take account for different platform numbers, your best bet is to take the next service that stops at Richmond Station. Now, usually take a look at platform 6, 7, 8, 12 or 13. Your best bets though during peak is definitely platform 6 or 7, as the Dandenong frequency is definitely the best. Or preferably take a Burnley Group service. Usually from platform 4 there's an Alamein service, but sometimes Blackburn and Ringwood services are also direct. However, not all of them are direct and some do head through via the city loop. And if you are lucky, there is, I believe, some Lilydale services that run direct to Lilydale, not via the city loop, even during the peak PM. So that would be much easier just because it gets you straight to platform 9 and 10 at Richmond, ready for that Glen Waverley service. However, there is a downside to that is if you get on at Richmond at peak PM, you're probably not getting a seat on the Glen Waverley line, especially because people generally ride the train to Glen Waverley, so there's not much movement with many of the other stations. So if you are wanting a seat during peak, of course, you can travel back to Flinders Street. However, even if you go back to, I generally would say, Flagstaff Station, you should be able to get some of the seats left on the train. So if you are in the city loop and you want to go to Flagstaff Station, then definitely take either the Dandenong groups, which is platforms 2, or take a Northern Group service, which is platform 3 in the peak PM, and that will get you in the right direction. Or if you're at Flinders Street, just go to platform 4 and 5 and take the next Northern Group service, as all of them do run via the City Loop. Get off at Flagstaff, and there should be some seats left. Around Melbourne Central is generally when it becomes a little too packed. And finally, express trains can't overtake each other because there's only 2 tracks on the Glen Waverley line. So even if there's an express coming in a few minutes, let's say in the peak AM, but there's a stop-stall service now, just take that because it will get you to your stop before any other train. However, do take note because there are a few odd express trains here and there on the Glen Waverley line, and I have been on that 5:23 PM Glen Waverley, and someone wanted to get off at Keong. Little did they know that to go all the way to Darley to switch trains and go back. So take note if you're on an express Glen Waverley service. Now time for some improvements on the Glen Waverley line. The first is to make a publicly available wheelchair accessible exit for Hainton Station Platform 2. Unfortunately, the only wheelchair accessible exit is the one to St. Kevin's College, which unfortunately isn't for public access. And I believe that platform is the only platform on the entire network that doesn't have wheelchair access, so it definitely needs to be changed, and as soon as possible, preferably. Even though it isn't the busiest station, it needs to be done. And of course, the other major thing I would suggest is indeed to remove the Glen Iris level crossing as soon as possible. At the time I'm making this video, in the previous 12 months, there has been 2 level crossing incidents, and one of those incidents has led that train to still be out of service, even though it happened months before making this video. Also during peak, it is especially busy, being that there is a highway right nearby that cars turn on, and on the one side of the level crossing there is actually a slope in the road, so it is very dangerous, very busy, and definitely needs removal as quick as possible. And I would even make the case that it is definitely one of the most urgent to be removed across the entirety of the network. That's how important I really do think this is to get removed. And to conclude, let's take a look at a cool story regarding the Glen Waverley line, and it just has to be the fact that a Siemens has made it to Glen Waverley before. On Wednesday the 5th of June in 2013, there was some digital radio testing, and they decided to take a Siemens on the Glen Waverley line to test that, which means yes, a Siemens has been to all the stations on the Glen Waverley line, which I think is just so cool. Unfortunately, the train was not in service, so it didn't have the Glen Waverley destination on its headband, which again would have been really sick. But yeah, it's the fact that a Siemens has been on the Glen Waverley line is, I think, so cool. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Hope you learned a thing or two about the Glen Waverley line, and until next time, cheers!